jobs and tax revenue right here at home. This report projects that recreational and medical marijuana will create an $11 billion market by 2019, which means the legal pot will be bringing us even more benefits in the future. Greece has had enough of austerity. Last week, the anti-austerity Syriza party won Greece's general election with a clear mandate against bailouts and the destruction of that nation's social safety net. Newly elected Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras promised to renegotiate Greece's debt and to reverse the harsh austerity measures that have wreaked havoc on the people of that nation and its economy. In response to the election results, leaders from other European Union nations expressed concern about the promises made by the new leader. But that doesn't seem to be intimidating Mr. Tsipras one bit. Rather than worrying about the EU, the IMF, and the European Central Bank, a.k.a. the Troika, the new party is focusing on the needs of the Greek people, and they could inspire similar groups in other nations. The election could spark the beginning of the end of austerity in the European Union and hopefully the rest of the world as well. 16 states in our nation have more people in prisons than in college dormitories. According to a recent analysis over at Vox.com, it's clear that we need to do more to address mass incarceration, which may start with changing our priorities. Our nation spends billions every year locking people up for minor nonviolent offenses instead of investing more in education that could help people avoid a life of crime to begin with. Although the map over at Vox doesn't include college students who are living off campus, it illustrates how many people we're putting in a jail cell instead of a classroom. This is not the type of nation we should be building, and we need to change our priorities as a nation. Let's stop spending money to destroy people's futures with a criminal record and preventing them from voting as well, and start investing in their future by giving them a college education. And finally, the U.S. budget deficit will shrink again in 2015, but other important deficits will continue to grow without congressional action. According to Senator Bernie Sanders, it's time for lawmakers to address our deficits in education, trade, infrastructure, retirement security, and jobs. Last week, the Congressional Budget Office projected that our budget deficit would total $468 billion at the end of September, the lowest it's been since 2007. However, Senator Sanders' report says that the CBO won't tell us about the suffering of tens of millions of Americans who are part of the disappearing middle class and who worry about the kind of economy we will be leaving to their kids. End of quote. His report explains how and why we must address these other deficits to regrow our middle class and put our nation back on a path to shared prosperity. For far too long, our lawmakers in Congress have been obsessed with the debt and budget deficit and have forgotten how we built the American dream in the first place. If we want to go back to being that great nation, it's time to focus on the deficits that Senator Sanders lays out in his new report. And that's the way it is for the week of February 2nd, 2015. I'm Thom Hartmann on Economic and Labor News.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And happy Friday, my friends. Pillars of democracy, truth, and justice. Believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Tomorrow I will be in Los Angeles, but Senator Sanders tomorrow, if you're in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. on the Saturday the 7th, tomorrow morning, Senator Sanders will be speaking at the Progressive Summit in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The website is PA, as in Pennsylvania, progressivesummit.net. And there's also a link over at thomhartmann.com if you can't easily remember that. And I'm guessing there might be at sanders.senate.gov. Senator, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Brunch with Bernie with Senator Sanders here. So what's up in the Senate this week?
Well, there is a lot of stuff going on. My mind is kind of focused on what's going on in the Budget Committee because I'm the ranking member there. And we've had two pretty interesting hearings so far, one with the director of the CBO and one with Sean Donovan, who is head of the Office of Management and Budget, the group that writes the budget, helps the president write his budget. So we've had some very good discussions. I think to me, when I look at the situation of the budget, it's absolutely imperative that we write a budget based on the reality of what's happening to ordinary people in America. And what's happening to ordinary people, I think most listeners know, is the middle class continues its 40-year decline. Real unemployment is not 5.8%, it's over 11%. Youth unemployment, 18%. African-American youth unemployment, about 30%. For the family right in the middle of the economy, the median family, that family's inflation accounted for income has gone down by almost $5,000 since 1999. But what we are also seeing, and the numbers are just absolutely almost unbelievable, is a huge transfer of wealth from the middle class to the very, very wealthiest people in this country. What we have seen is that the nation's wealth going to the middle class has gone down from 36% to less than 23% from 1985 to 2013. And if the middle class had simply maintained the same share of the nation's wealth that it had 30 years ago, it would have more than $10 trillion in cumulative wealth. Can you believe that?
Wow. So that's
and
a
then
10
on
trillion.
the other hand,
I'm sorry.
on the other hand, while the middle class continues to shrink, what we have seen just since 2009 is that the top 1% has experienced an $11 trillion increase in its wealth. So what you're looking at is an economy in which middle class wealth shrinks incredibly, and people on top end up with $11 trillion more in wealth. And where we are right now in terms of distribution of wealth, Tom, is the top 0.1% now owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. A study just came out very recently that in terms of income, since the Wall Street crash, over 99% of all of the new income generated goes to the top 1%, which means that economic growth doesn't mean anything because the people on top, it doesn't mean anything for the middle class because the people on top get it all. So that's where we are. And then you combine that with the fact that just last week, the Koch brothers reminded us that they intend to buy the next elections. They are prepared, along with a few of their friends, to spend some $900 million on the elections. And just stop and think for a second. If you had 2 million people, a lot of people, providing $100 in campaign contributions, that would be $200 million. That's about 20% of what one family is prepared to spend in the next election. And my guess is they're going to end up actually spending a lot more than that. So when you combine the distribution of wealth, the fact that the top 0.1% of 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%, when you look at income, 99% of all new income going to the top 1%. When you look at campaign spending, in which one family is going to spend close to $1 billion, the second wealthiest family in this country, an extreme right-wing family whose agenda includes ending Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the EPA, giving more tax breaks to the rich, and they're about to buy elections. We have to take a very deep breath and try to figure out where we are as a nation. We are certainly nowhere near being a vigorous democracy. We are moving more and more, in my view, toward an oligarchic form of society. And how do you turn it around? Can we turn it around? There was another story that came out that I thought was very interesting. You and I, Tom, for years have talked about our disastrous trade policies, how NAFTA and CAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China have cost us millions of decent paying jobs. Well, the largest trade agreement in history is called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is coming down the pike pretty soon. There was a study done by a group called Media Matters looking at how much coverage the TPP has received on network news. And you know how much coverage it's received, Tom?
Yeah, with the exception of the Ed Show on MSNBC, it's been zero, basically.
That's right. Virtually nothing. So here you have a huge trade agreement, which in my view will have a horrendous impact on jobs and income in the United States, on prescription drug prices all over the world, on issues of sovereignty, and the networks have decided to provide zero coverage to it. So you got all of these issues out there. You got a media, corporately owned media, which does not cover issues of importance to working families. You got a handful of families owning the political process, and you got a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the upper income, to the top 1%. How do you turn that around? Well, anyone who tells you it's easy won't be telling you the truth. But several facts are pretty clear. If we continue to have elections where 63% of the people don't vote, as was the case in the last midterm election, you surely are not going to turn it about. If you have a situation where 63% of the people, as a poll indicated a year ago, don't know which party controls the House or the Senate, we don't know much about the budget, we're not going to turn it around. So what our job has got to be is to, what I often say is create a political revolution in this country, which means change political consciousness so that ordinary people understand, maybe as much as the Koch brothers, how important the political process is. When you hear people out there saying, oh, politics is all crap, all the politicians are liars and thieves and everything else, I'm not going to vote. Ask yourself why the second wealthiest family in this country is going to spend close to $1 billion on campaigns. They're not fools. They understand that who controls Congress is pretty important. They think it's important. Working people should also think it's important. And then what we need to do is not only change consciousness so that people are involved in running for office in the political process. We have got to have a progressive agenda. Well, what do we do? What do we want? Where do we want to go? And I think we have to be very clear. We need to create millions and millions of decent paying jobs. How do you do that? Well, among other things, you rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. We have introduced legislation that calls for, along with Senator Barbara Mikulski, that invests $1 trillion in our infrastructure over a 5-year period. Tom, that creates 13 million decent paying jobs. How's that for a start?
Yeah, that's a great start. Exactly what we need. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie Hour, our national town hall meeting. Senator Sanders taking your calls and offering answers to your questions. We'll be right back with Senator Sanders.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz, and you can hop over to Facebook and check out his Facebook page, too. So, Senator, pick up some phone calls?
Let's do it.
Okay. Paul in South Lyon, Michigan. You are on the air, Paul.
Yeah, thanks. The president is being demonized over the TPP by allies of Ralph Nader, the guy that gave us 8 years of suffering under Bush. After NAFTA was passed under President Clinton, we had the largest